and this is going to be crucial. And if you get rid of this, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Like I said, if something was going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong here. I've been using this laptop now for a few years, and for a lot of my editing work, it's really starting to not be up to scratch. It's getting slow, it's getting bogged down, and honestly, some of the render times are keeping me in the office way past late. So we got in touch with some of our friends over at Kingston, and they've actually sent us over some RAM and a 2TB SSD to see if we can actually improve the performance of this laptop. But if this is your first time to the channel, then I'm happy that you're here. My name's Robin, and we do a lot of tech-related content, reviews, all sorts. So if there's anything you'd like to see, let us know in the comments below. But other than that, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be upgrading my own personal Dell XPS 15 back from 2016. And when I got it in 2016, this was a cracking machine. It had a 512GB SSD, which as you can imagine, I filled up pretty quickly. It had 16GB of RAM as well as a discrete graphics card. Now, since then, it's kind of been getting on in the years. Okay, so we're going to start with the SSD upgrade. Now, the first thing you're going to need for this is an SSD enclosure. Now, as you'll see, this has a sort of a thermal, I guess, blocking on there. So basically, it's important to just don't touch this. The oils on your finger will mix, and that's going to cause issues later on when you put your SSD in here. So it's best to just keep clear. Okay. Now, once again, it's important, once we get the SSD out, don't throw away this packaging, because you'll see here, this has a little key on the inside, and this is going to be crucial for our cloning software, because this is going to be free. And if you get rid of this, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Heap of trouble. Okay, let's get this bad boy installed. You'll kind of see that when you're doing this, the SSD has these teeth here, and there is a gap in the actual module itself where these things line up. So if you've ever played with Lego or anything, this should be pretty straightforward. Gonna pop this in. Like, Stephen, what am I doing wrong? I have these teeth here.
You should be going into the gold parts on top of them.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so you'll see basically, you'll know whether or not this is working because you'll see the little hole that we unscrewed has revealed itself with this little indentation. So we're just gonna pop our screw back in. Alrighty. So then let's just put the top back on. Again, this one is USB-C, which is fantastic. That should be mean that's going to be a lot quicker than if we were just using a regular USB 3.2 or something. And plugging it in, we'll see that nothing comes up. And that's fine, because at least it's recognizing that this is some sort of storage device. Next step is actually downloading the cloning software that Kingston provides. So the software that you want is called Acronis. So you just download Acronis. I'm going to just download this straight to my desktop. So one pro tip actually while we're waiting is I recommend getting your Windows key. And you can do that via a few free softwares. If you just look up Windows Key Extractor, we can just put a link down in the description. And essentially what that's going to do is, in case anything goes wrong during the installation, touch wood it doesn't, but essentially what that will let you do is, if you have your own current Windows key, if you have to reinstall Windows, you're not going to have to repurchase the license. You can just use the current license that you're running with. So once you sign up for an account, you're going to be prompted for your serial code, which you'll find on the inside of your box. So don't get rid of this. Also, I will say, if any of this seems confusing, Kingston also has a video on both their website and YouTube channel. They go into a little bit more detail than we do, so if you're not sure after watching this portion of the video, check them out. Again, link in the description, and that'll just take you through no bother. So we're going to clone disk. And this is straightforward, but this is also where you want to pay the most attention. So, because basically if something's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong here. So pay the most attention. We're gonna head to choose clone mode. You wanna just hit automatic, hit next. Here, we're gonna see our source disk. Depending on what the SSD you're upgrading to and the SSD you're upgrading from, this should be somewhat straightforward. As you can see here, I can tell my current SSD is disk 1. It has a capacity of 476 gigabytes or 512, and it's saying it's a so-and-so NVMe, blah, blah, blah. You can see that. Disk 2, you can see, is 1.8 terabytes. That's clearly our 2 terabyte SSD. That's the one that we have plugged in. It even says ROG, ROG being Asus's brand. So as our source disk, we want to make sure that we have that highlighted. We want to hit next, and we want to pray that I'm not making a mistake. Okay, and then that seems okay. You want to hit your destination disk. That's just disk 2. That's the only option you have. 2 terabytes, I think we're in the clear. Let's hit next. Okay, this destination hard disk you've chosen contains some partitions that can contain useful data. Click OK to confirm deletion of all partitions on the destination disk. This is a new disk. It's the new SSD. I think that's fine. So at the end of this, I'm going to have 1.3 terabytes of extra space. And frankly, that is unreal. Okay, let's just hit proceed and hope that it all goes well. Computer restart is required. Let's do it. Okay, so we just got a pop-up here. Now, this is saying one or more of your removable disks may not have started at the moment. Click yes to wait for a full startup of the devices, recommended. Click no to ignore uninitialized devices and continue. Now, we already tried clicking yes, and this pop-up just came up again. So we're going to try clicking no on this and basically seeing what comes up. Oh. Well then. Did this just cancel the process?
Yes. You're going to have to restart. You're going to have to go into the BIOS.
Okay.
And you're going to have to set that SSD as your boot up device.
Oh.
First one to boot up. Because I think the reason why it's not recognizing is because it's not top of the chain.
Oh. Okay. Right. Okay. How do I go into my BIOS?
Restart and probably F10 or F12 or something.
Okay.
Varies by brand.
Okay. God, like I said, if something was going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong here.
The problem right now is that you can't see it to clone it.
Yes. If this USB port doesn't work, will I just hit F2 here?
Yep.
Okay. If this USB port doesn't work, then we also have USB-C on this side.
Yes.
Maybe that'll work better.
So let's see if we can see it in the BIOS screen. Because once you can recognize it, once it recognizes it, it's there. At least that way it's good in some way.
So the issue that we're having essentially is that the computer isn't recognizing our SSD as a bootable drive. And that's a problem because it means we can't actually transfer any of our data onto the SSD to then boot the computer off of. If there's no operating system or anything on here, then we're kind of goosed. So we're gonna basically try make the computer recognize this. Oh shit.
Oh crap.
Waiting for removable devices. May not have started at the moment. Click yes.
No, I think we're in the same spot.
Yeah.
Let's try the other option B.
Okay, cancel. Okay.
Want to say something?
I did. I did want to say something, but Not right now. Let's cut the cameras. Okay, time for some real talk. We ran into a pretty serious issue. Essentially what was happening was Acronis, the software that came packaged with the SSD, wasn't recognizing the NVMe SSD that we were trying to clone to. It just wasn't creating the drivers to actually be able to boot and clone our system onto it. So we're after finding a new software that should be able to clone it called Macrium, and it's free. So we're gonna give this a go and see if this works. It's pretty similar to Acronis in what we kind of see from the outset. Here's our drives. I'm gonna hit clone this disk while this is highlighted. This is our source disk, select a disk to clone to. I'm gonna choose the new one. You can see 1.82 terabytes, that's how we know. I'm gonna hit next, new, clone summary. Okay, I guess this is just what it's gonna do. And let's just hit finish and hope, pray that this works. And I think it's working. I think it's working. I don't know how long it's gonna take. I don't know if it's gonna fail halfway through, but the overall progress is going up, so I think it's working. It's done. It's done. Thank God. Okay, so that didn't go exactly as planned, but I must say this is at no fault to Kingston or anything. The software provided in their package isn't actually their own, so we did have to go out and find another software here, Macrium. Really, that's kind of down to a combination of both our hardware with the XPS and the way that Dell has configured it, and also the way in which Macrium actually works. So you may not have this issue, but just know if you do run into a few problems, try looking for a different backup cloning software that will actually clone your OS bit by bit. So all that's left next is to get this SSD inside here. We're gonna install the RAM at the same time when this laptop is open, and we're gonna show you one other thing that's a little special, which I think you might like. Right, so now that the OS is cloned, it's time to actually install the SSD. And while we have the computer open, we're also going to install the RAM. So, first part is first. You want to disconnect the SSD from your actual laptop. So now that my computer is off, it's safe to do so. That, and let's open up the laptop itself. So, when you look underneath your laptop, you're going to see a few things, mainly screws. If your screws aren't immediately visible, they may be underneath some kind of rubber feeding. If you can't take that feeding off easily, you could try heating it up and that'll sort of loosen it, and then you can also reapply it to uncover the screws that are underneath. But luckily with my laptop, the screws are fairly visible, except for two more, which are hiding underneath this lip. So let's open them up. Okay, so now that the laptop is open, I can see here that this thing is absolutely filthy. And part of me thinks that that is a big issue currently, and maybe why it's so slow. So I think even if you don't upgrade your actual components, if your laptop's running slow, take a look inside it. It might just be dirty. I'll show you how to do that, kind of clean it properly, but first off, you're going to need this, which is just compressed air, and giving it just a quick once over. I'll go, look at that. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's looking a bit better. God knows how many years of dog and cat hair have just been stored in this. But now that that's reasonably clean, I think it's safe enough that we can just start installing the RAM. So let's get this out of its packaging. We're doing the RAM first as well. I know we've kind of opened this up to do the SSD, but we're going to do the RAM first because it is a bit of a more straightforward install. I don't have to remove anything bar the older RAM module. There's nothing kind of covering it up. So you'll see when we do the SSD, it's kind of a bit more involved. Now, something I do want to show you here as well is that when you get the RAM, such as this, you want to be very careful not to touch the gold teeth. Essentially what that can do is very bad stuff and cause a lot of issues within the computer. So if you just do your best not to touch those, you're going to be laughing. If you do, don't worry, just a little alcohol or contact lens cleaner will kind of sort you out. But before we can put it in, we got to take this one out. So let's be very careful to do that. As you can see, there is just two little clips on either side of this. It pops right out. Insert that, and I'm just going to pop this on this thing here. And again, being very careful not to touch the gold. I'm going to take out one module. And if you're worried at all, you can kind of see the teeth will be the parts that go in first. And you see here, this actually goes this way. So that's going to make sense. But the way you can tell is that there's kind of like a little gap in the teeth here that matches up with a similar little insert there. So that should just slide right in, and in it goes. We're going to do the other one. Again, being careful not to touch the golden teeth. It should, all these little pieces should just match up. Once you kind of feel a little bit of resistance and making sure everything is in there nice and tight, just push down and in it goes. Not too bad. Okay, let's take a look at the SSD. Okay, so time to look at the SSD. And like I said, this process is a little bit more involved. And to start with that, I'm gonna say, just to be extra safe, basically, we disconnected our battery. Now, if you are able to see your battery connection, I'd recommend disconnecting it just to really make sure that there's no power going through this thing and that you have no chance of shorting it. Again, if you can't actually see your battery connection, don't worry, you'll be fine. It's not something I'd stress over. But here's the next part. If you can see right here, we've got this kind of layer of sort of a thermal protection. And this is one of those pieces that you want to make sure you do not touch with your fingers, because the oil on your skin can really kind of mess this stuff up. So we're going to take these little tweezers, and I'm going to, when you do it, you should be a little bit more careful, but sure, look, here we are. That's going to reveal our SSD, and what you can see here is that surprisingly this is quite similar to what we saw in our enclosure. You know, you got our little screw here, we've got our teeth here, and it's going to be the exact same process to actually get rid of this. So I'm going to take my tool from earlier, just like that, take our little screw, make sure that is safe there, and I'm going to lift up here carefully and remove it. Okay, so this SSD, after cloning it, now has basically the entire system which was on this SSD. All my files, my programs, everything that I've been using for the last 5 years is on this SSD. So again, I am a little nervous doing this. Goodness. Okay, just like before, I'm going to insert it into these little teeth. Oh, and that was so much easier. That just went right in. Get our screw back on. Goodness. God. Okay, that is that. That is brand new RAM. That is a brand new 2 terabyte SSD. That's 4 times more space than I had beforehand, and that is twice as much RAM as I had beforehand. So this is pretty exciting. Now, like I said, we had one more thing to show you, and that is actually going to be underneath this heatsink, where we're going to find the CPU. Okay, so let's have a look at the CPU. Now, this is one of those things that I mentioned before, that if you're having issues with just like slowness or anything inside your system, try giving your CPU a clean, and I'm going to show you exactly how. So we're going to take our tool again. When you look exactly at the heat pipes here, you'll find that there's 6 different screws. Now that's going to vary from laptop to laptop. You might have 4, you might have 6. Either way, we're going to have to unscrew these in quite a methodical fashion. In a sense, we want to take care of them one across from the other. So now that those screws are loose, let's just pull up the heat pipe. So being careful not to touch any of the contacts and just leaving your fingers on the pipes. God, I'm really talking like I know what I'm doing. Oh boy, there we go. Oh boy. Yoo-hoo! Okay, so I'm just gonna leave this over to one side. We're not gonna forget about this. We're definitely gonna have to clean these bits too, as well as this. So, goodness, look at that. You can kind of see here, this is the thermal paste, and clearly it's just sort of dried and evaporated over time. So we're going to be reapplying a little bit of that to make sure that heat dissipates evenly. Okay, so when cleaning these sort of components, you do need to make sure you have a special contact cleaner. This is designed specifically for touching these sort of metal contacts so as to not damage or short out anything. All right, so I'm just going to fold this over, get this going, and just give that a little dab. And I'm going to start with CPU. Wait, what? Wait, what?
The factory put way too much thermal paste on.
Uh-huh.
It's only supposed to be in the middle, and it's never supposed to fall off the side.
Ah.
So the factory has basically taken your CPU and given it a nice thermal coat that is now, in a sense, cooking it. It's way too much.
Way too much?
Yeah.
Is there anything to do about that?
Yes, get it all off, start from scratch.
Okay, so I can get this off just with the contact cleaner?
I wouldn't spray the machine.
No.
But I would basically take your fingernails in and just grab that stuff on the side and just take it off. That's
Really?
how much there is.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be that way. Just so you know.
Okay. All right, so now that that is nice and clean, and as Stephen pointed out, that was apparently way too much thermal paste on there. So, hey, there's another free tip. If you notice that your CPU or GPU are just slathered in thermal paste, give that a good clean, and you might see a big step in your performance. But before we reapply any of our thermal paste, we're just going to give it another quick once over with the air. Especially in these areas behind where the heat pipes were, because a lot of the gunk that we blew in earlier actually got stuck in there. So now that we've done this, let's do the same with the thermal pipes. We're going to get our contact cleaner and just take away all of this nasty stuff here. only to reapply it with our own. And that is that. Geez. Right, well, time to put it back on. So this part, again, this is somewhat of an optional part because it does cost a little bit more to actually buy the thermal paste needed. You'll see the tubes that you get, I think, as far as, Stephen, am I right? It's around 20 bucks for...
The best stuff is 20 bucks. The cheap stuff can be $9 to $10.
Yeah, but I guess like if this is an expensive laptop that you're trying to upgrade, you want to get something pretty good, right?
Good thermal paste lasts a long time.
Right on. Okay, so the trick to this is essentially you want, as Stephen said, a drop about the size of a pre-cooked grain of rice. So let's see if I can get to that size, or am I just going to be reinstating the manufacturer's mistake? First of all, you have to be able to get the cap off, don't you? Okay, here we go. I swear to God. Okay. Right. Pre-cooked grain of rice. All right, Stephen, maybe you also just tell me when.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle?
Yep.
And I'm just gonna put in a bit in. Like that much?
Right in the center.
There?
That's it, stop.
Stop, stop. Oh, okay. Is that just enough or too much?
That's just a little bit too much.
Okay, I'll do it better in the GPU. All right, coming in. Okay, and there.
Yep. That's
Oh, jeez. It had some spillage.
Pull back on the syringe. Pull back on the syringe.
Pull back?
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so I should have specified with Stephen beforehand if we were talking long grain or right, but it's okay. So we don't need to put any on our actual heat pipes here because the amount that we have on is going to be sufficient. So it's just a matter of just reapplying these back where we got them. So being careful to line them back up with their holes. Just get them nice. Those are all lined up. Sweet. And like we did beforehand, we're going to put these screws in kind of just section at a time, making sure that we're not putting one down more than any of the others. Okay, so that's kind of it. The last finishing touches I have here is I'm going to put the battery, I'm going to reconnect that. I'm going to put the lid back together. And you know, I'm going to start using the laptop. So I'm going to use this for maybe a few more days over the weekend. We'll get back and I'll let you guys know how I found it and if this has actually made a difference. All right, so it's been 1 week since I upgraded my laptop and I'm going to share with you some of the results. Now, I've been doing my typical work things, working through the Adobe Suite, Photoshop, After Effects, a little bit of DaVinci Resolve. But also, as you can see here, this is kind of my typical outside of work setup. So I'm going to kind of use this to illustrate some of my results. This is kind of what I use for streaming. I have my camera set up here. I'm running it into OBS as well as Ableton Live to get some live music going into it. So let's take a look down here and I can actually show you some of the tangible results I've gotten, starting with the SSD. Now, when it came with the SSD, I didn't see many, say, performance upgrades to start, but the biggest thing is obviously the actual size and capacity that I've now reclaimed in my laptop. I started out with 512 gigabytes and I now have a 2 terabyte SSD, which is nuts. That's literally 4 times the size from beforehand. And with all these projects I'm doing with not only 1, 2, but 3 cameras shooting sometimes 50 gigabytes per clip, this just allows me to keep everything within my laptop, get rid of the external hard drives, and then just keep everything self-contained. So let's look at the RAM now as well, and this is kind of where I saw my most tangible upgrade, especially when it came to performance. Starting out before, you can see I had 16 gigabytes of RAM. Most of the time, that was maxing out around 80% on every single process I was using when it came to live or any of my projects. It was always capping out. You can see here, out of 31.9 gigabytes, I'm using 13.6. That's 43%. That's essentially my original 16 gigabytes of RAM, but now I have I have more than half of that percentage left. I could open up Photoshop at the same time as After Effects. I could work between the two, sending files back and forth. Beforehand, that would have just slowed my machine down to a crawl. So for the amount that it cost to upgrade, this one in particular was well worth it. So let's move on to the CPU and GPU, and this is one of our sort of bonus tips that we gave, but this one is also the most surprising for me. So if we take a look here, you can see that now with the CPU, our clock speeds are pretty much maxing out around just over 3 gigahertz. That is like the most that my CPU is willing to give. So essentially what we've done by cleaning off all that thermal gunk that the manufacturer had put on and reapplying our own, the CPU, we've actually now allowed the CPU the space to hit peak performance when it needs to. Whereas when it had that coating of all the thermal gunk on it, essentially it was overheating before it could actually ever reach peak performance. So we have just freed up a whole ton, and I'm actually paying for the performance that I initially wanted from this laptop. So just like the CPU, my GPU is now actually available to max out its performance when it needs to. So whenever I'm using things like Resolve, which is especially GPU heavy, or even programs like OBS, which you can see here, the GPU basically is able to surpass those thermal limits that it had beforehand with all that goo and gunk that was on the GPU then, and is now able to actually perform to the extent that it was built to do. And hey, that's not just great for creator stuff, it's also perfect for gaming. I'm gonna get higher frame rates, a little bit better performance, and ultimately I'm getting that extra bit of life out of my laptop that I wanted. When I bought this back in 2016, I had no idea that it was gonna last me 5 years. And frankly, now I'm willing to bet it's gonna last me 7. So if you are someone like me who was looking to upgrade their laptop, but didn't want to go through the headache of shopping and looking and not only that, spending the money on a new laptop, then honestly, try this out first. Not only is your current laptop going to get a few more months or days or years out of it, but you're going to save some money on the long term as well. But again, if you enjoyed this video, please let us know. If we did a good job and you could follow along, I'd love to know. And if you want to stick around and watch some more videos on other laptops, because maybe you are just in the market, check out these videos here.